Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Squared Up Coffee Break webinar. Today we're talking about community management packs and sort of what we've been up to at Experts Live. My name is Matthew Long, and today I'm joined, unusually, remotely, by product architect Richard Benwell.
Hi, Matthew.
Richard, sort of befitting his international man of mystery status, is off somewhere in the world today, but he and some of our guys were at Experts Live the past week, and they've been there and looked at some of the sessions and what's been going on, and they're going to fill us in on some of the cool stuff that they've seen. Primarily, we'll be talking about some sort of community MPs and community efforts and things people have been up to sort of in the SCOM world that we think you really should know about and are definitely worth a look into on a variety of different topics. So I'm not going to play the point too much today. Let's just get straight into things. So Richard, what can you tell us about Experts Live itself?
Yeah, great. So we were out at Experts Live last week. So that's sort of just the 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's the event that was System Center Universe, and that's now been rebranded as Experts Live Europe. So I guess many people sort of on the call may be familiar with SCU, but not necessarily the Experts Live brand. But it essentially covers System Center and some Azure topics, and kind of broad sort of IT management topics, and not just System Center now, which I guess sort of most of our day-to-day roles are broader than just the System Center suite of products. So it kind of reflects the sort of general shift in people's responsibilities now. But as you can see from the slide there, a pretty good size conference. I think probably from our point of view, one of the sort of primary System Center conferences, certainly in Europe. So we were very sort of pleased to be there. Loads of really great sessions. I've just sort of highlighted sort of 5 sessions there that were kind of covering SCOM and OMS. I think all of the sessions were recorded sort of professionally, and the slides and the recordings will be up online, I guess, on the Experts Live website, I think within the next couple of weeks. So it is worth following up in a couple of weeks' time and just checking out those sessions there. So Kevin Green took us through SCOM and OMS updates, I guess, just some broad news there. We had a Whisky and Community MP session, and I'll talk about that in a second. Christian Heidkamp from NICE did some nice sort of SCOM trivia, like some insider tips and tricks when looking at SCOM security and performance. Alexei covered the new OMS query language, and Marcel did quite an interesting session on creating your own OMS solution packs, so actually building your own custom OMS solutions, which was kind of interesting as well. So if you weren't there, I know actually some people online on the webinar were there. So hi guys, thanks for a good time out in Berlin, and nice to see you. If you missed that one, or you're sort of interested in events near you, there are now increasingly more and more Experts Live events. So there are regional events in the US, APAC, and Australia, and I think they also have a sort of series of sort of kind of country-specific events, and some brand that sounds a little bit like sort of coffee breaks. Actually, I think there's an Experts Live cafe brand for local meetups as well. So I think you'll probably start to see this brand Experts Live more and more, and it's a really kind of good brand, I guess, to rally around to make sure there's some SCOM and System Center community alive and kicking out there. So I guess you'll sort of see more and more of this. So I won't go really into too much detail around the event itself. I think what was clear, though, from the sessions around SCOM and sort of the general content was that the activities that are really interesting are community activities. I mean, Kevin Green, pretty much said, okay, here are the updates from Microsoft in terms of their management packs, but that's not particularly exciting. You're not sort of seeing too much come out there, just regular updates to keep up with sort of newer versions. Where it's really exciting is in the community space and some community packs. So Kevin actually covered, I think, 3 or 4 different packs, and then we had a dedicated session looking at some community packs. And I think there was also a nice sort of birds of a feather session with Kevin Green and Stefan Roth in where they covered off some general questions around SCOM as well. So that was kind of really clear, is that that's where it's at the moment in terms of SCOM is the community, and there's a lot of stuff out there that I think a lot of people don't know about. So we thought in this coffee break we could focus on some of those community management packs and kind of raise the visibility of them and make sure everyone knows about them. So I guess with that, let's head into a little bit about the Whisky and community management pack session that we had.
Yep, the most important thing first, the Whisky.
Yeah, so we ran a session on SCOM community and Whisky, which was very, very well attended. So I guess people are just really interested in the SCOM community, and just there's some sort of side bonus there. But so we went through a range of whiskies, covering a little tour of the island of Islay in Scotland. So those 5 whiskies there are all from Islay. So that was a kind of, I guess, a good side of it, but there was plenty of other great content, and I'll cover off some of that now. So the first thing we covered off in that session was introducing, or sort of reintroducing, our PowerShell monitoring management pack. I think most people listening to this webinar will be familiar with that already. So our free open source management pack that adds PowerShell support to SCOM. So everywhere in the SCOM console where you could create monitoring, tasks, monitors and rules based on VB script, you can now do that with PowerShell with the addition of this free management pack. So hopefully everyone by now has downloaded that and checked that out. We asked Stefan Roth to give us some sort of kind of exciting new community effort with SCOM. He actually decided to pick up our management pack and do something with our PowerShell management pack. He's pretty excited about the potential of that with SCOM now. And actually, I guess as sort of Stefan Roth does, rather than just some dry event log monitoring or something, he decided to show us something a little bit kind of quirky and fun. So he was rocking the session, as it were, with a really cool Spotify integration that he'd put together on top of our PowerShell management pack. So you can see there in the bottom right photo from the actual session itself, he created a dashboard within the SCOM console and sort of allowed you to see your playlists, your devices that you were logged onto with Spotify, and then essentially control Spotify on any device, including your mobile phone, for example, via agent tasks and through the SCOM console. So he'd done that all through the PowerShell management pack. I think he created integrations such that if you create an event log, he was monitoring the event log, creating an alert, and then based on that alert, he'd start to play some music via Spotify. So I guess kind of fun, right? I guess there was some level of integration with Spotify. I'm not sure whether that's an SDK specifically for Spotify, like a PowerShell SDK, or whether he was just using a kind of REST API or something. But just shows the point that really with PowerShell, you should be able to integrate with everything and anything. That there should be no boundaries. And of course, that was the idea of SCOM all along. It just was always a bit too hard to integrate. But now with that PowerShell management pack, you have PowerShell support right there in the SCOM console and the wizard. So it should be pretty straightforward to integrate with anything you can imagine. But I guess Stefan Roth had a bit of time, and he is an expert. So it didn't take him too long. And there you go. The bottom right hand screen shows sort of he had created really quite a sophisticated Spotify console within the SCOM console. I think there's quite a few people who are interested in actually getting their hands on that. I think kind of one of our team was like, "Oh, great! I'm gonna get that installed in my lab and get that running at home." I'm not sure whether Stefan intends to put that on his blog or open source it or something, but I guess if there's enough petitions for people to get their hands on it, then he'll do the honourable thing and publish that so we can all play with it. But it's a really good example. I guess probably even something you could show your colleagues or something and just demonstrate what SCOM can do. So that was kind of fun, and really just, I guess, was just some fun. Obviously not something that you'd be putting into production, but does show off the PowerShell management pack.
Yeah.
But what we did more broadly is run a competition out at Experts Live to win the infamous or the famous Lego Death Star that we're often given away. And the competition was to suggest practical real-world uses of the PowerShell management pack. And we had a lucky winner, Christian Schmidt, who was at the conference. There are sort of a good number of suggestions. This one just actually was very simple and quite effective, and also a nice example of integrating SCOM with other tools like Configuration Manager. So this was a task. So I guess that's kind of three lines of PowerShell there that actually is integrating with WMI, that prompts the server to go and check for missing updates, downloads them, and installs them. And I think Christian was saying actually they had a period where they had to get a large number of servers up to date, and essentially were making those upgrades happen sort of manually and sort of chaperoning those sort of servers through the upgrade process. So he said this was really useful to get into SCOM. So we figured that would be kind of quite a nice task where, as a server owner now, you have a little bit more control over performing maintenance and upgrades manually when you need to.
I like the fact that Stefan did this huge integration with Spotify, which isn't necessarily very practical, but had all these moving pieces to it. And then Christian has a 3-line script that actually is something that's really pragmatic. But I think that this sort of integration really demonstrates just how you can really do even the simple stuff and the complex stuff. But yeah, this task on like 1,000 servers on demand would be quite taxing manually and very time consuming, sort of from waiting around for Config Manager to do it, because Config Manager isn't very timely. So that's I really like that. That's a great example.
Yeah, and this is probably also a good example where I don't know whether it's Christian who wrote this script himself. Maybe he was sort of familiar with Config Manager and the WMI namespace for it, or maybe actually he just worked with the Config Manager administrator, and the Config Manager administrator knew how to do this, and Christian kind of knew how to sort of push that into SCOM, for example. So that's a good example where if you just now work with someone else in another team, as long as they can give you that snippet of PowerShell, you can probably now put that into a SCOM task or a monitor. So we had a number of other entries. We'll look at probably putting those together in a blog or some other resource and sharing those, and of course probably still kind of continue a number of sort of activities, maybe some more competitions to see if we can kind of get more ideas of how to use PowerShell within SCOM. I guess there are an infinite number of ideas out there, and we'd like to collect the best of them and share those with the community, so you've got that inspiration, and also just at the end of the day, if you can copy those 3 lines into a SCOM task, now that saved you maybe sort of half a day's worth of effort trying to find out how to do that yourself. You've now got that in the community to share. So hopefully you'll see more of that coming.
Absolutely.
All right, so we ran through PowerShell in that session, and that was accompanied by I think a whiskey or two. So that was some good content there. And then the next one we got up was covered actually both in Kevin Green's session and also the Whisky and Community Management Pack session. So it's kind of interesting. Svi actually came out to Experts Live. We had been just in contact with Svi. He's based out in Israel, and invited him out to Experts Live with us squared up. And actually, unknown to Svi, Kevin Green then promoted his management pack in Kevin Green's session, and unknown to Kevin Green, Svi was actually sitting in the audience. So we had kind of Kevin just say, there's this kind of really cool new kind of SQL query monitor management pack, by this guy called Svi, and Svi was sitting there in the audience feeling very proud that his management pack was now up on stage with an MVP promoting it. I think it's really interesting. Again, it's probably something that should be in SCOM since day one. It's similar to the PowerShell management pack in a way, which is you can now create monitoring, as in create monitors and alerts and collect performance data through any arbitrary SQL queries. So this is not SQL monitoring. This is actually querying any database. So for example, an application database, you can now work with that application team and say, okay, we'll actually query your database. We'll look at something like number of pending transactions or number of orders processed, or whatever that application data is, and we can now query that on a regular basis, compare that with some threshold, and alert based on that threshold, and also collect that number as a performance metric as well. So again, really opening up SCOM, and you can imagine this on a squared up dashboard where you have the breakout infrastructure monitoring data and the application monitoring data alongside your actual sort of application level data. So for that team, they can actually see their application data alongside the monitoring data.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting you mentioned that having this in SCOM anyway, because there already is a monitor in SCOM that's built in for running SQL queries, but it doesn't actually give you the results back, does it? It literally is just, can I connect to this database, but nothing more useful than that.
Yeah, again, like the health monitoring, the availability of that database is essentially, it's a bit, I guess that's similar to URL monitoring, isn't it? So you can do sort of URL monitoring of a website, or you can do sort of a SQL monitoring of a database, just to check that actually it does return and the response time is within a certain time frame. Whereas this, I think probably if you look at that middle screenshot, so what you do is essentially give it a database, a database server and a database, so essentially the connection string, and then in the middle is the query, and at the bottom you specify which column you want to actually select the result out of. So in this case, he's just doing a select count star from a table, and then that comes back as sort of open alert, so you can kind of give that answer a name, and then I think there are other, I've just provided some brief screenshots here, but there are other pages on that wizard that allow you to compare the value you've got back with a threshold. And I guess, as you say, Matthew, that's where it differs from just saying, oh yeah, that SQL query succeeded, that database is healthy. We're actually using the data in the database.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about like the value of outside-in sort of monitoring before, but like this is just such a key way of doing that. Of saying like it's Monday, it's 9 in the morning, we expect to be seeing a lot of transactions, a lot of customers like buying product or whatever right now, and we're seeing no new orders in the database. That's an immediate sign that something somewhere is wrong. So
Yeah.
I think this is incredibly powerful.
So this is an open source management pack. Svi's put that up on GitHub. I think you download it, integrates again straight into the SCOM console, a bit like the PowerShell management pack. So hopefully you've got the PowerShell management pack. Go get this one as well. I'm pretty sure you'd have a use of this within your own organization. This is, I think, Svi has been working as a SCOM administrator for many years out in Israel. I think this is one of the first efforts where he's contributed it to the community, and we said this in the Whisky and community session at Experts Live. Please do give these guys sort of feedback. If you do use it, just give them a sort of a thumbs up and kind of a +1. If there is something that it doesn't do, or it sort of doesn't work quite the way you expect, then sort of give that feedback. It's quite a big thing to publish some of your work out on GitHub and sort of put your name on it. And you really want to know whether it's being used and whether it's sort of offering value, and you're very, very happy generally to make changes and improvements. You just want to know what those sort of changes and improvements should be. So please do sort of engage with all of the authors of these community efforts, including Svi here.
Absolutely. It definitely, speaking of someone who's put stuff on GitHub as well, it is always good to receive some feedback and not just feel like you're putting things into the void.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Next up, and a management pack. This slide unfortunately looks a bit dry, but probably, well, I mean, all these management packs are great, but I think this should be an absolute must-have management pack in everyone's environment. This was promoted by Kevin Green as well. I think actually, before I go into the detail, just one thing to note here, which is great, it's from Nathan Gao, who I think is a Premier Field Engineer, or works for Microsoft in some capacity. But just look at the date there in the update. This is May this year. So this is, I get, like the others are relatively new packs. This is not just sort of old stuff that's been around forever. This is all stuff that's coming to the SCOM community fresh. There's still lots going on. There's still lots of activity, and there's actually some really, really kind of great stuff coming out of the community now. So this is something that's just come out sort of a few months ago, and is well worth going to. So that blog there introduces it and pretty much says everything you need to know about it. Nathan's blog in general is an awesome resource. So bookmark that blog, and I've just pulled out a couple of quotes where Nathan introduces this pack. Essentially, it's bundles together lots of different rules and monitors for general sort of broad sort of security monitoring in your environment. And I think it was inspired by Nathan going to some sort of specialist security session where they kind of talked about all of these things that are happening, and this sort of realization that actually attacks aren't typically sort of instantaneous. It's not, you're attacked, one day there's some breach, and then there's the exploit that sort of same day. Typically, there's this sort of breadcrumb of evidence that actually, you have some vulnerabilities and you have been attacked in some way. So the sort of top quote there, it was noted that an attacker is in an organization on average for about 250 days before they are found. So it's not just this grab and run, sort of smash and run. It's actually, once you do have vulnerability, once you do have someone sort of inside your organization, then potentially they're exploiting that for some long time or building up an exploit. So his point is that actually there's typically evidence that something is happening, something is amiss, and you really want to sort of focus on kind of collecting and monitoring all those different sort of points of evidence. And the sort of second point he makes is often what happens is organizations as a whole go out and spend a large amount of money. The security team get a big budget. They go out and they get a tool like Splunk or OMS. They spend a lot of time with it. They collect a huge amount of data, and then they're not actually sure what they're looking for. So they're collecting every single event log. Great, we've got every single event log from every server, so we should know what's going on. But what are we looking for in those event logs? And can you actually collect everything you need to from those event logs? So what he's done is, I think, I don't know where he's got all the sort of sources from, but he's taken a really, really broad array, and I've just put just a dozen or so on the slide here. But there's probably about, I don't know, sort of a few dozen different issues that he monitors for, sort of evidence that he monitors for, particular services starting to run, kind of changes in your system and so on. And he's put that all into one pack. Absolutely kind of awesome. I think kind of without a doubt, kind of put this pack in your environment, there will be many people who are sort of interested in the results, and certainly sort of show it to your security team. Some of them just, even that top one is a great one, and Kevin Green just focused on that one, which is monitor changes to your domain admin groups and the other kind of key groups. They do not change very often. They should not change very often. Absolutely, your domain admins should get an alert as soon as a change is made to any one of those groups, and so on. So there's a few others, kind of check whether sort of local admin groups on servers have been modified, failed RDP attempts, and so on. So all really, really good stuff. Also, interestingly, as well as making all of these rules, which there are a large number of, configurable through the management pack, he's also made them configurable through GPOs. So recognizing that actually, the Active Directory, your domain administrators are not necessarily highly engaged with SCOM. They're probably not going to be tuning overrides, but they do control the GPOs. So, for example, if they want to add other groups to be monitored and check changes to other security groups, they can just enable those through GPO, and they don't have to override that in SCOM. So I think that seems pretty intuitive, a really good sort of user experience as well. He sort of really thought through how this pack is going to be used, not just sort of bundled all this stuff together and sort of thrown it out there. So an absolutely top pack. I'd recommend it. We haven't kind of used and looked kind of closely at it ourselves, but certainly just on the description of what Nathan said and sort of kind of Kevin's introduction to it, I think this should be a pack that a lot of people should be interested in.
Yeah, I think he said in the blog post, like, he spent over a year building this pack and like talks with like 10 or 11 different security experts as well. So it's not just sort of his opinion on this. This is actually a real community effort to pull this together. So yeah, I think it's amazing.
So top pack there. Hopefully we'll maybe get a dashboard pack together on top of this as well, so that once you've got that pack in, you can sort of surface this this data, again, an engaging way that you can kind of show to your security team or to your IT management and kind of get them engaged with these details.
Great.
All right, next up, so I think that was mentioned in Kevin's session, and I think in our session we then talked about not the management pack, but a web API for SCOM. So it's not a management pack. This is actually just an IIS website that you can drop onto a management server. This comes from Martin Ernst, working out in Norway at a service provider there called Intility. He pitched this during the session as making SCOM sort of accessible, stroke kind of interesting to your millennial developers. So when you've got he works in this sort of quite dynamic modern managed service provider. There's a lot of custom sort of tooling and solutions going on, and the developers that are building that tooling are not interested in a SCOM PowerShell SDK that they have to get deployed onto a certain machine and work out how to integrate with. Give them a REST API and they're motoring, but they don't want to be sort of held back by some sort of old school Microsoft SDK. So he had this challenge within his organization, really trying to sort of again engage people with SCOM, this time not through the UI, that they're a squared up customer, and he sort of engages them through the squared up dashboards, but through an integration and API level. So he started an initiative to build a REST API essentially for SCOM. Very lightweight. There's a couple of examples there. You can pull details of an alert just simply now by doing a GET request on an API with the alert ID. That's it. Right, you don't need to fire up PowerShell and do a PowerShell commandlet and sort of parse the results. You can hit that URL, get that alert detail as a JSON response, and then kind of do something with the data. Again, with maintenance mode, he sort of integrated that. So that's actually a change. You make a post request into this API to put an object into maintenance mode. So if you are someone who's having to try and get sort of SCOM integrated with some other systems and some other sort of processes within your organization, this should be sort of top of your list to look at. And again, a really good example where I think this is probably one of the first projects that Martin's put out on GitHub, open sourced it, very excited about it himself, really sort of sees a lot of value in it, really wants people to engage with it and kind of feedback and get involved in this, either just through feedback or through actual sort of active development. So try that out. If that does sort of fit with some requirements you have in your organization, do take a look and do contact Martin on that.
Absolutely. This is really cool.
So we'll see where that goes. Hopefully see some good solutions come out of that as well.
Does So are there any tie-ins with Squared Up itself as well using this? Because presumably you can leverage like the post requests to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things with actions in Squared Up and pulling data using the Web API tile and that kind of thing. Like if you've got some odd requirement Web API supports, you can now do that.
Yeah, potentially. And actually, Martin came to us initially and said, "Okay, I have this requirement to create a web API. Can I access essentially like the underlying APIs in Squared Up, so where our browser components are talked about to the server?" And we very specifically aren't trying to create generalized web API. Typically, the APIs we have in Squared Up are specific to Squared Up and designed for use in Squared Up. So this was really sort of an acknowledgement that actually, although Squared Up has a sort of similar sort of facade on top of SCOM, this is a specifically designed API for this sort of purpose. And yeah, you're right. If you have both of them installed, then potentially through additional sort of custom actions on your dashboards and your perspectives, then you could hook into this API and sort of create kind of custom SCOM functionality yourself.
That could be cool.
I think actually Martin also does a lot of work with, obviously with sort of automation, but things like Azure Functions. So again, being able to automate SCOM through a sort of a purely like kind of network interface and not having to install the PowerShell SDK was a requirement, and kind of again unlocks a lot of possibilities with other more sort of modern trendy technologies. You can now kind of make SCOM part of that and not feel like SCOM is this sort of kind of ancient kind of dusty system sitting in the corner that's sort of unloved by all of these kind of new hip developers that are putting together these solutions with REST API. So SCOM joins the 21st century again, both with PowerShell support and with a REST API. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's very cool. I bet you, as a few guys internally, can do cool things with this in Slack.
Yep. Oh yes. Yep. Yeah. I'm sure we'll have fun with it in Squared Up as well. So that's a non-management pack resource that was presented in our community on Whisky tastings. That went down well, and so thanks for Martin and for Svi earlier for doing those presentations. And then the next one is a really interesting one. This has actually been around for a while, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting solution that I don't think has had much visibility up till now. I think this was developed about a year ago. So it's a solution to help you with OMS and your SCOM and OMS integration. So if you are using OMS out there or interested in using OMS, then please do sort of check this out. What we've heard a lot from our customers who have tried OMS is they get burnt by it, because actually they blow their budget. They sort of burn through their budget very quickly because they enable lots of solutions, lots of data goes up to OMS, and they suddenly realize how much that's cost them, and they don't really have time to refine the data and the solutions, before being told, too late, you've spent all your money. So we've sort of heard that, and another issue we've heard obviously is like a little bit with SCOM management packs. When an OMS solution changes, there's always a risk. There's always a risk that it's going to start uploading a large amount of data, or it affects some application where the OMS solution is installed. Now with SCOM management packs, you have control over when to deploy those management packs, but with OMS solutions, Microsoft has control over when those solutions are going to be deployed. So Nathan Foreman, who's a SCOM administrator out in the US for a Fortune 500 company, he's now sort of just gone contractor. He had exactly this issue. He tried OMS within his organization. He burnt through all the budget very kind of quickly, and he was very, very concerned that he had no control over essentially changes into his production environment. Microsoft were in control of when things were going to be pushed into production, not him, and that made him sort of very, very uncomfortable. So this is a suite, I think, of management packs. It's actually multiple management packs that essentially give you much more visibility and control over your OMS data. So the first one is you can have control over which agents get which solutions. So if you really like the sound of a solution, but you know that actually to enable it across your entire estate would be very expensive, then you can just target that solution at specific agents. So you can do that through just your standard SCOM groups. So you can enable and disable solutions for specific groups, which just obviously makes a lot of sense. And gives you a much more sort of fine-grained control over what's used where. And the second one is that it has this sort of gatekeeper function for when OMS updates get deployed into production. So when Microsoft update an OMS solution, you get told through this management pack, and you'll get an alert to say, hey, there's a new update for this OMS solution, but you're in control of when that gets deployed into production. So you can then say, okay, ignore this update, or go look at what the update does, or deploy it out to staging first, and then once you're happy there, deploy it out into your production. But it kind of puts you back in control. So I think, either if you are already using OMS, or you're planning to integrate SCOM and OMS and start using OMS solutions a lot more, check these out and kind of get in the driving seat, be in control before you sort of think things race away from you, and the sort of project doesn't work out because there's too much data being uploaded, or there's too much change happening.
Yeah, I mean, we had a customer, didn't we, who said anecdotally they enabled some monitoring in OMS, and they blew through their entire cloud budget for the year in a month. I had to just turn everything off.
Something like that. Yeah,
and this is just so valuable for that. I still can't believe that Microsoft pushes solution updates without your knowledge. Like, they'd never push a management pack update in SCOM without you being in control.
It's the nature, it's the nature of the architecture, right? It's sort of, again, cloud-based monitoring. That's one benefit, is you're always up to date. But of course, in enterprise IT and in production, there's a sort of balance to be made between kind of making sure you're up to date and secure and so on, and also them sort of being in control. It's a bit like Windows Server updates, isn't it? You want to be up to date, but you want control over when those updates are going in. For example, a maintenance window overnight, or at the weekend, or some sort of schedule, not just whenever it's released. So yeah, and that's sort of, I think also a lot of customers have tried OMS. You've had this sort of negative experience initially, just sort of spending a lot of money or not being in control, and of course, you don't necessarily get a sort of second bite of the cherry. Too often, you sort of, if OMS doesn't work in the first sort of effort, you often then sort of leave it for a long time. So if you are going to try OMS out, I'd say get this installed and be in control from day one, and then hopefully you've got more chances of it being a success. I mean, some of the OMS integrations we suggest at Squared Up, we think there's some great value to be got from putting some data up into OMS, enabling some of those solutions, and then bringing that down back into Squared Up. But it normally does mean that you need to be in control of specifically what data for what servers. For example, change tracking, you could enable that for every single server, or actually you could enable that just for some key application servers and get the benefit out of that without having to pay for all of that data from every single one of your servers.
I mean, the classic example there, we don't do change tracking on maybe some test boxes that are always changing anyway because we're still building the app or whatever.
Yep. So I think that was the set of packs I wanted to talk through. As I say, one thing that was sort of loud and clear was that there is a lot going on. There's a lot of exciting stuff out there that brings a lot of value to SCOM, and as per sort of the security monitoring management pack, that sort of very new stuff as well, so things that have been only out for just a few months, as well as some very old community packs out there that have been out there for years, but still people haven't necessarily discovered it. So sort of one thing I think we also came away with from this show is really realizing that I think there has to be better visibility of what's out there in terms of the community. This sort of webinar is sort of one effort to try and address that. We've been sending out some sort of infographic type mailers containing other management pack solutions that have been very well received, but kind of watch this space for further sort of innovations. I think we're really determined to make sure that there's a lot more visibility and access to all of the great community resources out there. So we'll be working on that as well. So watch this space. Yeah,
absolutely. I think just sort of to recap that, these sessions, if you want to see this stuff in a little more detail, these sessions will be up on the Experts Live site in a couple of weeks because they were all recorded. But if you want us to do a future coffee break on some of these topics, I know certainly maybe the SQL query one, I think we're definitely going to plan a coffee break for, as with the security management pack. But if you've seen one of these and thought, I'd really like a deeper dive into that, or maybe see how that could be integrated with Squared Up a little more, get in touch with us and let us know which sessions you'd like us to do one on, and we'll absolutely cover these again in more depth in the future coffee break.
Great.
Cool. Okay, I think at that point we'll probably try and wrap up this week, so make sure we don't go too long. But thanks very much, Richard, for I'm sure the event was enjoyable, but thanks for sort of giving us your eye of what was going on there and what was sort of worth seeing. And if you haven't been to Experts Live before, but you've looked at this and thought, oh, this stuff's awesome, I'd really like to go, definitely get yourself some budget and get organized for going next year, because it's an awesome crowd that goes to that event, and the level of expertise there is really, really high. So if you've got problems or concerns or queries, or you've just always wondered how you'd actually tackle a particular problem, you will find the answer to it there if you go and ask that crowd. Okay, so with that, let's wrap up the coffee break. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we have a topics survey at squareup.com/topics where you can go and suggest future topics that you'd like us to cover in a coffee break, perhaps one of the ones that we discussed today, along with other sessions that we think might be valuable as well. So if you haven't gone there and voted before, go there, cast your votes, or suggest some topics, and make sure that these sessions are actually useful to you and we're covering the right kind of thing. You can go to our Coffee Break Series microsite where there's a registration link there. So if you've got a colleague or a friend you think actually they'd love this stuff as well, get them to go there and sign up, and then they can they'll receive an email whenever a new session's booked in, and they can join the webinar from there. The recordings and slides are published via our blog, along with a whole wealth of other content. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll make sure all the links in the presentation today are in the description below as well. So definitely check that out and see what else is going on, along with our other future sort of community MPs and efforts that we come across. That'll all be there on the blog. And then there's a playlist for this YouTube series as well, where you can watch all the previous coffee breaks we've talked about and get access to all of our sort of resources. There's a wealth of content there, not just on Squared Up, but on SCOM in general. So definitely check that out if this is your first coffee break and you haven't seen sort of what we're doing here before. Now, as always, our engineering team are online, as is myself and Richard, to answer any questions you might have. If you have any questions, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much, Richard.
Thanks, everyone. Speak to you next week.
Have a great time, guys.